Hi. Albert Einstein said that intellectuals solve problems and geniuses prevent them. So, what if instead of focusing so much energy on fixing failing marriages, which is still important work, but what if instead, in the name of preventing relational trauma, we focused more on preventing marriages that are going to fail? Hi, my name is Olivia. I am passionate about helping you understand relational trauma so that you can avoid it, overcome it, and move on with your life. So, today is an introduction on what to know and how to start talking about difficult things with your partner before you say I do. All of this comes from Do I? The Premarital book. You can find it on Amazon. I'll also leave a link in the description. So before we can just jump in and start having these really difficult conversations, we want to lay some ground rules. This is important work so that you can have these difficult conversations as safe as possible, because it's not dangerous, but it can be a challenge. Let's use that word. It can be a challenge anytime you kind of poke and prod a relationship. Sometimes we can take that very personally, and we want to move away from doing that so we can just have open, honest conversations and open, honest dialogue between each other so we can really understand, who is this person I'm about to marry? So we might feel like we know them really well, and we may feel like they know us very well, but truly, when you start having some of these conversations, it will more than likely give you more insight into who the other person is. It's always very surprising to me when I talk to a couple and I find out how little they know about each other, each other's finances, each other's background, each other's true wish in the relationship, even if they've already have over a decade under their belt of marriage. So it's really important to have as much open, honest conversation as you can before you say I do. So if you're already married, this is still great exercises that you can walk through throughout the entire book. It can help you and your partner to get closer together and to help each other have some of these difficult conversations, because a lot of times we don't have these conversations because we don't know how. Part of it is we don't know what to ask. You just kind of stumble across problems. Then you try to talk about it when everything is already really inflamed and really heated. So rather than waiting for a problem to talk about it, we want to, in the name of prevention, remember, have these conversations in a calm time where we can just see it as information and be able to take breaks and come back to it before there's a lot of pressure and a lot of heat in that moment. Okay, so to lay a few ground rules, this comes from page 12 of Do I? One of the first one is, will not interrupt while the other is talking. So that's a great ground rule to have in any type of relationship you have, especially where you're going to have a difficult conversation. And that is because if you start interrupting, that's a great way for yelling to get introduced into the conversation. So if I'm talking and you interrupt me, now I'm feeling like I got to talk even louder to talk over your interruption. And now you're talking even louder in your next, right? And so now we're going to be escalating and shouting before we know it. And once you're shouting, nobody's hearing anything. We're not actually having a conversation at this point. And we're more likely to get heated, say things we don't mean, waste a bunch of time doing that, and still not really get to the meat of what it is we were trying to talk about. So that's a big one. Agreeing not to interrupt each other. The second one, we will keep our manners as we go throughout these conversations. So manners are a big thing. So saying like, please, excuse me, would you mind, is it okay, right? You're asking a lot of permissions. You're treating the person with a lot of respect, as though you understand that you are not in charge of them and that you actually need their permission to move further and carry on in certain directions. So really important to keep your manners and to stay polite. So it's kind of interesting. Sometimes we have more manners with someone on the street than we do with someone in our house. And we want to realize, like, okay, if I wouldn't talk this way or this aggressively or this rude with a stranger on the street, let me not do that to someone I'm supposed to love and care about. So keep your manners throughout the entire conversation. Another one, we're going to make a safe space where we can share. So sometimes when we hear something that our partner is saying that we don't agree with, it can feel like a threat. And so we kind of want to like squash it down, shut it down. We want to bring them around to our perspective. We want to bring them over to our side of the street where we can feel safe with them. But before you say before you say I do, you really want to be sure you know what you're agreeing to. So rather than trying to convince your partner of something or tell them why what they think is wrong or why they should see it this way, try to first just see them for who they are, because that is what you're signing up for. That is who you're agreeing to marry. So really important that you just let them talk, let them be who they are, because that's exactly the point of this entire exercise, is you want to be able to see them for who they actually are. Next one, we'll work on saying hard things and hearing hard things. So to really build intimacy, to really get closer, we have to be able to say honest, true, difficult things, and we have to be willing and able to hear it. So if your partner can't tell you anything hard without you melting down or without you going into crisis, right? Or if you can't say anything hard to your partner without them melting down, going to crisis, pretty soon you're going to stop being honest. You're going to sugarcoat things. You're going to sidestep things. You're going to give them just bits and pieces. And still, that's not the point of what we're doing here. We're really trying to get to know who the other person is. So this isn't permission to say harsh, hateful things. This is just permission to be your honest self and to say what it is you actually believe and mean, and try to come right down the middle as much as you can. So there are other ground rules that you can find starting on page 12 in Do I. Just wanting to be mindful. This is an introduction into, before we have these heavy conversations, we have to lay like a playing field that we agree to play on. You know, when you're about to play a game with someone, you have to learn the rules. What are the parameters? We have to have those parameters and boundaries with difficult conversations. Otherwise, it could mean chaos. And with chaos, someone's going to get hurt. And we don't want these very honest conversations to always equal hurt, because guess what? We're going to stop having them. And then here we are years later with big problems, when maybe we could have squashed that with having an honest conversation way back here. So that's what we want to get better at, having really difficult conversations where you can just take it as information and just hear it for what it is. Okay, so here is an exercise that you can find on page 14 from Do I. And this is just an introduction to sharing. So in a relationship, it often seems like one's really good at sharing and one's really a closed book. So you kind of have like this super open book, and then you got a pretty closed book. So what we want to do is make sure we have a simpler, less intrusive, less personal or private conversation, so that we can kind of get the feel for what it feels like to share. So one of the first questions is, my full name is blank. That may seem silly to introduce yourself to your partner that way, but really it's just, this is my full name. So you would give your first name, your middle name if you have one, and your last name. And then your partner's going to share the same thing. Next one is, this is on page 14. I was named after, or my name means blank. So if you were named after someone, this is what you want to let your partner know. And if your name means something, then you want to let your partner know what it means. If you have to take a moment and Google it, do it. Take a moment, Google it, and read to your partner what your name means. Next one, I was born, and where were you born if you know the day and the time? And if not, just what about your birth do you know? And that's what you're going to share with your partner. So notice these are not necessarily top secret things. These aren't really your opinion. These are just kind of the facts. So if you cannot get through these first 3 questions on page 14 without fighting, you may want to put the book aside if you order the book and go to counseling, because this really would not be a conversation that should be evoking or eliciting a fight or some sort of emotional, physical response, right? It's kind of like, how are you going to argue with me my full name and where I was born, right? If we're having a fight about that, then we probably have bigger relational problems with each other, and we're going to need someone else to help us out, because this is not something that should be causing a fight. So it's sort of like kind of testing the waters, you know, are alligators and crocodiles swimming in here? Or, oh no, this is a pool that we can both jump in freely and begin to move around and learn how to swim together, right? And if not, if you're jumping in or you're putting a toe in and you're getting bit, you have to get some of those alligators and crocodiles out before you can go further into those waters, because guess what? It's probably going to be dangerous. So if you move on to page 15, let's say you get through some of those softball questions and there's no fighting. You're really respectful of each other. You just listen and you maybe learn something new, or maybe it's like, okay, yeah, I kind of already knew that. whichever the case may be. Moving on to page 15, it says, how did I feel when I was sharing versus when my partner was sharing? So there's going to be throughout some questions that are for you and some questions that are for your partner. So it's like, when I was sharing, I felt really comfortable and I felt like you were listening. Or when I was sharing, I was feeling really anxious. I was worried that I was going to say the wrong thing. Or when you were sharing, it was hard for me to listen because I was worried about sharing. Just try to be as honest as you can. Just what were you feeling and thinking when you were sharing and also when your partner was sharing with you? Another one is question number 2. One thing I learned about myself from going through the introductions. So as you shared your introduction, as you reflected on what it felt like to share and what it felt like to be shared with, what's something you learned about yourself? Maybe you learned that once you have your partner's ear, you feel a lot more settled and can share easily. Or maybe you learned like, wow, it's actually very hard for me just to sit here and talk even about my name. It's really uncomfortable for me. This is very hard. So whatever the case may be, just try to be as honest with yourself as you can so that you can start this growing process. Because if you're going to be in a relationship and you're thinking long-term like marriage, then you really got to be as honest with yourself as you can so you can sort of like find the kinks that you still got to work out. Or you still want to find the areas, oh, this is more challenging for me. I'm like really going to have to push myself in this area so that I can grow. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? The main thing is just try to be honest with yourself. And it's not necessarily going to be easy, but it is going to pay dividends for you and for your partner, especially if you're getting through your marriage. So the hope is not that everything's going to be easy, breezy, and smooth sailing. I don't think for most people it is going to be that way. But a bigger hope is by the time you get through all the exercises and all the questions, you really can answer the question of, do I? Do I take you? Do I really want to say I do? I've shared what I can share. I've listened to what you have to share. Now I'm seeing you for who it is you've told me, who I've seen you to be over the past however long it takes us to get through this, plus my prior experience. And at the end of all your answers and all my listening and all my sharing, is this the right marriage for me? And hopefully by the end of all the questions and exercises, you're going to feel very confident in your answer rather than I like the way you make me feel and I like the way you look, or I don't want to lose you, therefore I better marry you, or whatever any of us uses to make that big decision, right? So hopefully it's, okay, I've seen the person you are, I've heard your values, I've heard your goals, I've heard what you're about, I've heard your struggles, I heard where you came from, I heard what you're hoping for from a life and from a partner, and yes, I'm on board, all that sounds good to me, or actually, that's not at all what I was thinking, so I'm not going to be able to commit to this. So check out Do I? It's on Amazon. And in weeks to come, I'm going to leave some more information from the book that we can continue to look at so we can hopefully get better at preventing some of that relational trauma. I'll leave some videos on the screen for you to go check out for more information and good resources for relational trauma. Take good care, and I'll see you in the next one.